Hello, my name is Heather Ambrose, and I'm with the Department of Public Works and Environmental Services Stormwater Planning Division. I oversee a county program called Operation Stream Shield. This program was developed in 2019 as a partnership between the Stormwater Planning Division and the Office to Prevent and End Homelessness to reduce the amount of litter reaching the county's waterways and riparian areas in accordance with the county's municipal separate storm sewer permit, and now includes invasive species management. The MS4 coordination section works with internal and external agencies to develop workforce pathways that allow homeless shelter clients opportunities to develop the skills and knowledge necessary to compete in a diverse economy. Non-native invasive species are a component of Operation Stream Shield because they pose a threat to the integrity of the county's natural areas and native species. They often outcompete native plants and reduce available habitat for native wildlife. The Department of Public Works and Environmental Services is striving to restore native areas for a well-balanced ecosystem. The purpose of this video is to review and discuss key non-native invasive species and proper removal techniques. Please remember that safety should always be your first priority when managing non-native invasive species. Please let your site supervisor know of any known allergies and if you are carrying an EpiPen. If you encounter poison ivy, please use the wipes that are provided to reduce any side effects. Be sure to always bring your first aid kit to any site, and please remember to always bring your work gloves and to wear long pants, socks, closed-toed shoes, and preferably long sleeves. Erin Stockschleider and Sarah Holtz with the Fairfax County Park Authority will review and discuss the non-native invasive key species we are asking Operation Stream Shield crew members to focus on.
My name is Erin Stockschleider and I'm with the Fairfax County Park Authority. I'm here to talk to you about the non-native invasive species that Operation Stream Shield is going to be working on as part of their project, and also going to talk about the tools that we're going to be using for their removal. Remember, your safety is crucial, so if you ever have any questions about how these tools are used, be sure to ask for assistance. The first tool we're going to look at is our uprooter. This is going to be used to remove larger shrubs and vines. We have some smaller hand tools, such as a handsaw and smaller pruners. Larger pair of loppers for thicker shrubs and branches, and a rake and shovel for digging. And you always want to make sure that you're wearing gloves to protect your hands.
Hi, my name is Sarah Holtz. I volunteer for Fairfax County Park Authority Invasive Management Area Program as the site leader for Difficult Run Stream Valley Park in Oakton. So this is Japanese barberry. You can identify it by the barbs on the branches and teardrop-shaped leaves. They also have red berries in the fall and winter. It sometimes helps to take loppers and remove some of the branches like this, and then you take the uprooter, you put it around the base of the plant, and you remove it completely, including the roots.
So the species that we're going to remove right now is called Porcelain Berry. It's important to make a positive ID on the species because it can very closely resemble our native grape. The first thing we're going to do to remove this when it's climbing up a tree like this is make a cut at the base of the tree, and then make another cut farther up the tree. And we're going to want to make sure that we bag this as it can resprout. And also if there's berries on it, we're going to want to make sure to get all those berries in the bag as well for disposal. This invasive vine is called Mile-a-minute. It's easily identifiable by the triangular leaves and the small thorns that grow along the stem. You're going to want to make sure that you're wearing extra heavy gloves when removing this one. It also has these blue berries that appear in late summer to early fall, which is another easy identifier. But we're going to be extra careful to make sure that those berries are bagged and properly disposed of so they don't stimulate new mile-a-minute growth. To remove this one, you're going to pull as much as you can from the roots, which is going to be fairly easy since it's an annual plant, and stick it in the bag. So the species that we're going to look at now is called Oriental Bittersweet. It's a climbing vine and can overtake and wrap around trees. It has these oval-shaped leaves, usually with a little tip at the end. This can be cut off trees year-round, and again, it must be bagged and disposed of correctly. So the best way to remove Oriental Bittersweet is to find where it's wrapping around the tree Make sure that you're cutting the bittersweet and not any native vines or any branches on the tree. And begin to cut sections off without harming the tree. The next stop on our invasive species tour is autumn olive. This is normally a medium-sized shrub, though it can grow to be a fairly large-sized tree. A really good way to identify this tree is to look for the silvery underside of the leaves. This tree also gets red berries in the fall, and so when you're removing this, you want to make sure that all those berries are going to be bagged and disposed of correctly. Several different ways to remove this shrub depending on how large it is. The first way is for a smaller to medium-sized autumn olive. You can cut away these branches and then use this tool, the uprooter, around the trunk and actually lever it out. If it's too large to fit in the uprooter, you can simply cut the branches back a little bit above ground height. It will continue to resprout, but if you keep cutting it back, it will eventually deplete the root stores and it will die. Another option, if it's a large tree to a large shrub, is to use a shovel and dig out the root ball. This invasive plant is called Periwinkle. It's fairly easy to remove. It can form a ground cover, so we're just going to pull it up by the roots and bag everything that we pull up. It's also mixed in with some English ivy here, which tends to have the same growth pattern as periwinkle, so pull it up at the same time. So the next invasive plant we're going to talk about today is winged burning bush. It's got its name from the bright red color that it gets in the fall. You'll often see it added as part of a landscaping plan because of that bright red color. Unfortunately, it does escape to native areas where it has invasive tendencies and can form monocultures. Another way to identify this species is the green color of the new stems. This species is called winged burning bush because the stems often will have little wings on them. Unfortunately, this plant does not have that characteristic. You can remove this several different ways depending on the size of the shrub. The first way is to use your loppers to cut back some of the branches to allow you access to the trunk if necessary. You can then use your uprooter tool around the trunk and apply leverage to lever it out of the ground. If that doesn't work, you can cut off all the branches and it will start to resprout, but continued cutting over several years will eventually deplete the root sources and it will die. Or you could use your shovel and dig out the root ball and kill it that way.
This is Pachysandra. It grows aggressively by root systems. In order to remove it, you have to pull the roots out completely and put them in a bag.
The invasive species I'm standing to right now is called bush honeysuckle. It has these opposite leaves, which makes it easy to identify. It can be a small shrub up to a very large shrub. When you're going to remove this, you want to make sure that it has hollow stems, like this one does. While rare, there is a native honeysuckle that can occur in this area that will have solid stems. So if you encounter solid stems, be sure to stop cutting it back. There are several ways to remove this bush honeysuckle. The first is to cut back whatever branches you need to gain access to the stump, and then use your weed wrench or uprooter to use lever pressure to get it out. You can also cut it back. It will resprout over a period of time, but as you recut it, it will deplete the root stores and it will eventually die that way. Or you could use a shovel to dig it out. The invasive species I'm standing next to now is called Multiflora Rose. Now this isn't your normal garden rose. This is going to have very small pinkish to whitish flowers on it. When you're working with this species, be careful as it does have thorns. Several different ways to remove this small shrub. The first is simply cutting it back, making sure you bag everything because it does often have small seeds called rose hips on it that we want to dispose of correctly. You can also get all the way to the ground and attempt to pull it out from the roots, but again, be careful as it does have thorns. This invasive vine is called English ivy. It can either grow on the ground as a ground cover or grow up trees. In fact, it can completely cover the tops of trees and smother them. How we remove it is going to depend on if it's growing on the ground or growing up a tree. When growing up a tree, we're going to very carefully make several small cuts at the bottom and remove about a foot-long section of the English ivy and bag it. There's no need to pull the vines off the rest of the tree as it could injure the tree. And you also want to make sure that when you're removing this, you're not getting any dust and debris in your eyes that could come from any falling branches. So it's best just to leave these vines in place. Removing it from the ground, we're going to pull it up and get as much of the roots up as we can. Being sure to bag anything that we pull, as these roots can resprout very easily. This invasive species is called winter creeper. It can form this dense ground cover called a monoculture, or it can grow up trees the same way that English ivy does. Since this is on the ground, we're going to pull up as much as we can by the roots and make sure that we bag it so it can be disposed of properly. If it was growing up a tree, we'd remove it the same way we would English ivy, cutting off a small section at the base of the tree and removing just that small section to be sure we're not injuring the tree or ourselves from falling debris if we try to remove the vines from higher up. And then we would try to remove as much of the roots as possible around the base of the tree. This invasive species is called Japanese honeysuckle. You can recognize it by its opposite leaf pattern along its stem, just like the bush honeysuckle. This is what it looks like when it gets a little bit bigger. It'll grow twining around trees. Here's a better example of that twine, and it will actually cut into the trunk and can suffocate and kill the tree. So it's important to remove this from trees whenever possible. To do that, we're just going to cut a small section of vine and remove it. This portion we would want to bag and dispose of. There's no need to unwind this from the rest of the tree. We don't want to injure the tree by disturbing its bark or have debris fall in our eyes by looking up the tree. On the ground, you're going to want to remove it by the roots whenever possible and bag it for disposal.
This is wineberry. It can be easily identified by the leaves of 3 and a white on the underside of the leaves. It also has red hairy thorns, and the best way to remove it is to grab it by the base and pull it out.
This invasive shrub is called Japanese holly. It can grow in this dense tangle, though this is actually several shrubs growing together. The best way to remove this is to clip back some of these branches, bag them as it can resprout, and then use your uprooter tool to use leverage to get it out of the ground. If it's too large, you can cut it to the ground and do multiple recuttings to deplete the root stores, or you could dig it out with a shovel. This next invasive species is called Japanese stiltgrass. It's an annual plant that's very easy to pull up, which can be deceiving. Each plant has hundreds of seeds on it. So even though it's easy to pull up, it's important that it is bagged and disposed of so the seeds do not get a chance to fall off and create hundreds of new Japanese stiltgrass plants.
Garlic mustard appears in spring with heart-shaped leaves that smell like garlic and small white flowers. Pull the entire plant and bag it.
Once all non-native invasive species are removed from an area, the ground may be bare. Please rake the surface of the ground and place the grass seed evenly over the exposed area. You will need to use the partially shaded roadside mix for areas that receive full to almost full shade, and the right-of-way native woods mix for areas in partial shade to partial sun. If you are not 100% sure you have identified a non-native invasive species, please leave it. If you have any questions, ask your site supervisor to reach out to county staff for more information. Thank you for your dedication and hard work. The county and community appreciate your commitment to protect Fairfax County's natural resources.